Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's special edition of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you had a wonderful year, and here's to your success and fulfillment in the new year. It is officially our 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and we're so thankful for your support, whether that be listening, sharing with others, giving us reviews, sharing your feedback with me, whatever way that you've supported us. We are very, very appreciative. It means a lot and gives the team here the motivation to keep the podcast going. So thank you so much. I've learned so much myself in the past year from getting to interview these guests, and hope that you have been able to learn from the discussions as well. There were a few episodes that were very popular and had messages that really stood out, that we got a lot of feedback on, stood out to myself, our team members here, or others. So we wanted to share these messages with you again, kind of a highlight reel, if you will, for the last year. So we pulled out some of the major highlights and just great messages for this special edition episode. We hope you enjoy listening to these as much as we did enjoy. All right, everyone, this interview was a special one to get to interview Jeremy Locke, former special operations in the military, co-founder and COO of Aerial Recovery, someone that is truly saving lives and healing veterans, shifting their mindset and developing their skill set and giving them purpose again. And what Aerial Recovery, the organization that he co-founded, is doing is to save trafficking victims, taking down criminal organizations. Just truly remarkable. Jeremy is an amazing human being, and he shared so much wisdom on this podcast episode. I encourage you to check out the full episode, but this few minutes is great. So a lot of great takeaways for me on this one. I hope it's the same for you. Enjoy.
It is a human problem. To not feel comfortable to go out and to speak your feelings or speak your truth and your story. And what I've really understood is and learned, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about two types of people in your life. To me, you have anchors and you have beacons, right? I kind of envision everybody's like my metaphor I use is you're kind of like on a ship, right? You're on a ship and you're setting sail to whatever God has in store for you. And in order for that ship to get moving, while an anchor might be great to keep you in a harbor and keep you safe, but at the end of the day, you're not going to go anywhere. And God has an amazing, impactful, wonderful purpose and mission for each and every one of us on this planet. And it's up to us to follow and figure out what that is and go and do it. And so you have these anchors that are, your friends, sometimes they're family, they're people that help hold you to what your vices are. These are like, to me, I was an alcoholic for about 12 years. These are the ones that go to the bars with me. Everything's around alcohol. If I tell them that I'm not drinking or I'm trying to get sober, which I did on many occasions, a lot of them would make fun of me for it or not believe me or, try to encourage me to drink. And they're really people that are denying me what God's mission is. They're holding me back. And I really tell you got to cut those anchors loose. And there's other people, these are your beacons, right? And as you're sailing off and heading towards your purpose in life, you'll come across them. And they're these big shining lights that kind of, they illuminate danger that's around you, and they guide you to directions you're going. And you may pass by them because they might be going somewhere else in this life, but they're going to be there and they want to share their experiences to make your journey easier and better because they understand that there's a higher calling and purpose for you. And I've just learned you got to surround yourself with beacons. And that's really what we're trying to tell these veterans in the program is like, you're a warrior. You're a protector. That's what you chose to do. And just because you're not in the military or first responder community anymore, doesn't mean that you got to take a knee and calm down and not have that warrior instinct in you. And this is a big one for me when I was going through my healing journey, which I'm still in now, is I had a ton of doctors and a ton of people tell me like, hey, Jeremy, like, just calm down, man. Like you did it. Like you deployed a bunch of times. Like you went out there and served your country. Like just, relax. Like here, take these pills. They'll chill you out. Just, stay in there, collect your retirement. You're a 100% disabled veteran. Collect that. Just go fish. But I'm telling you, I'm not designed to stop and fish. If I'm fishing for something, I'm fishing for human traffickers that are enslaving women and children and men all over the world. Like that's me. That's that warrior spirit. And you can even hear it when I'm talking. Like I understand that like God gave me a certain set of skills, and it wasn't for those 20 years in the military. It served me in the military, but that was my training ground for these next 40, 50 years of what my calling in my life is that I believe that God's calling me towards. And that's what I'm trying to remind everybody that's in our program is like, stand up, lift your chest up, figure out where you want to go in life and where you're being called to go. And let's figure out how to get you there because you have the expertise, the skill set, the desire. And now through Aerial Recovery and the Heal the Heroes program, you have the community, which is filled with beacons that are going to illuminate you on your mission and purpose in life. And that's really what we're trying to do. And you said it perfectly earlier, Phil. It's not just a veteran problem, because when I go and speak and I get an opportunity to talk on this podcast, I know those of you that are listening, whether you're, a business executive, an entrepreneur, well, I don't care what the heck you are, like a doctor, an athlete, is the moment your purpose is pulled from you, you feel lost. And that's when the enemy starts knocking on your door, and the enemy's the best salesman there is. And he'll get you drinking. He'll get
distractions,
you
whatever it is.
Yep. He'll get you drifting in life.
What, man, wow, that was good. We talk a lot about association, and I just love the anchor and beacon. I think first of all, anchors aren't bad people. They're not trying to be bad people. They're not intentionally doing this, but just recognize an anchor as an anchor, and don't fault them for that, but recognize it and be cautious of, if you're in those discussions, be cautious of it. Also be cautious of how often you're in those discussions, and go find beacons and hang out with beacons and become a beacon, right? Like be a beacon yourself. Like, I mean, honestly, ask yourself the question, am I an anchor for others or am I a beacon for others? And it doesn't mean you're good or bad either way. It's just like, think about, are you an anchor or a beacon? But the people you surround yourself are so powerful. And I love that so much. And then, man, this purpose question, I want to dig into that a little bit, because you're giving, I mean, so just to make sure, like Aerial Recovery, down and out veterans thinking about the worst thing possible taking their lives, and you're giving them, they have the skill set, but you're training them. You're building their mindset, and you're giving them purpose because they're going out and they're doing phenomenal things. But now I want to connect this to our listeners. So I'm not sure what my purpose is. Like, I think I know the direction I want to go, but God only knows, right? Like, we don't really know. And what I encourage people is, like, you don't have to know, move in that direction. Like, wherever the beacon is taking you, just move in that direction and just trust that it'll work out. But how do you think about that? Like, I don't know what my purpose is. I haven't really thought about that much. What's your guidance on that?
My wife, Brittany, she has a really good little line. She says, like, your why will make you cry. And the program that we send our veterans through, what it really does is it helps you get to be where you want to be at the end of your life. And if you have not done this exercise, I really encourage everybody listening to do this, is sit down and write your own eulogy. So you write your eulogy at the end of your life when you're, 90, 100 years old, hopefully, but you write it as if what you would want your loved ones to say about you and what you accomplished in your life. And then take a look at that eulogy. And then the next thing you do is you write your eulogy as if you died today. And this is a very normal thing that we do, especially in military planning. It's going to identify those gaps. Like, I'm here now, I want to be here. What do I need to do and fill in to be able to get to this point? And at the end of the day, like, this future eulogy that you have, it may change, because you hit the nail right on the head. Like, if you don't start taking steps forward and definitely take them towards those beacons, you're never going to know anything in life. It's just about perspective. Those of you that have been blessed with the ability to travel, at a younger age, you're going to see the world completely differently. You're going to see opportunities completely differently. We have everything possible. The entirety of human knowledge is at your fingertips nowadays. So you need to enlighten, enrich, and open your world up, and you'll start seeing things that are important to you. And another little exercise I like to do too is I call it a purpose smile. We all carry, these things around with us nowadays, our phones, and take pictures everywhere and all the different places. And what I like to do is I go back through my phone periodically, and I can find these points in my life where I call it your purpose smile, where you'll see a picture and you have, like, the ones where you're posing where, like, oh, hey, we got to take a picture with everybody. Or you have those ones where, like, you're just cheesing it up, man. And I'm like, man, like, I was freaking happy that day. Like, what was I doing that day? Where was I? And for me, it's mainly like, I'm in Honduras and I'm working with kids out there, or I'm back and visiting my family. Like, when I see that purpose smile with me, or or I'm at my organizational end of year meeting with my whole team around me, and like going over the work that we did, like, and I'm just cheesing it up, and like that's, to me, that's a purpose smile. So how do I replicate those moments and then be intentional about putting those in how I plan my steps forward, and everything boiling down to my daily activities. So it's, you've got to be intentional about your life, and you have to understand that, we have a finite amount of time. A really great buddy of mine, Trav Bell, he always says this, and I love it. He says, I am sick and tired of looking at people who die at 40 and they don't get buried till they're 80.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, like, that's resonates with me so much. Like, your mission is never over, man. You just got to keep moving.
I think the eulogy process is a really good one. And I would say two things. One, give yourself some grace for where you're at today. Don't beat yourself up over it. But the point of the exercise isn't to beat yourself up. It's to gain clarity on a direction you want to go. And then it's not going to be exactly as you planned out, because while you can move in that direction, God has a plan. But just move in that direction. Just take the small steps to go. And it doesn't, just go in that direction. And then, this purpose discussion, and, you said your wife, Brittany, your why will make you cry, but then you also went to purpose smile. Like, are you doing things that make you cry and smile a lot? I think is a cool way to think about, like, if your emotions are in it and what you're doing, you're going to cry a lot. You're going to smile a lot. Brian Kight has been a great leadership and life mentor of mine, and I continue to learn from him, and I continued to learn from him in our discussion we had back in, I think it was May. I just remember talking about self-awareness, self-discipline, self-confidence, how all these things work together. And then also we had a different discussion, which was on how much content we consume versus time reflecting on that. And I've been working on that all year since this discussion. So this discussion had a big impact on me. And Brian's just had a big impact on me. And I hope you find the episode insightful and helpful. This short clip is just a small piece of a great discussion we had. So be sure to check out the full clip.
I'll start with, and we'll kind of I'll start with the personal system that is the one I used for years, and used for years myself before I ever taught it. That I think leads directly into what we're just talking about from a development perspective. That's just a good structure and system to be able to use. And it's really kind of I'll jokingly refer to it as the holy trinity of self-management. But it's three things. It is, and technically what I call these, so you guys know if you hear this, these are called core skills. I call these core skills. There's three of them. We all possess them, and our whole life reflects these three core skills: self-awareness, self-discipline, and self-confidence. Self-awareness, self-discipline, self-confidence. And you could put those in a traditional 3-circle Venn diagram. And at the intersection of those things, I could explain your entire life by what happens at the intersection of your self-awareness, your self-discipline, and your self-confidence. Everything about where you are and what's going on in your life is explained by the dead center of that right there. And for context, if you change just adjust the terminology of those and square it against wherever your belief system comes from, whatever fuels your belief system. Know yourself, control yourself, believe in yourself. Know thyself, remain in control of thyself, and believe in thyself. Wherever your belief system comes from, that is the instruction set of your belief system, right? Whether it's this religion or this practice or this, that, every single one of them informs us. You must understand who you are and stay connected to who you are and see yourself in that way. Know thyself, know thyself, know thyself. That's number one. Number two is everything for all of human history is trying to point us at how do we stay in control of our own faculties? How do we stay in control of those things which are only for us to determine? And if you look at my life, right, I know all of mine. If you look at your life, when things have gotten sideways for us and not gone well, there might have been other circumstances around us, but it's always connected to us not staying in control of ourselves the way that we were capable of or the way that we knew to. Always. We drifted from discipline. And then the last one is believe in yourself. Because if you know yourself and you control yourself, you still have to move yourself forward into an environment or to do something and believe in yourself enough to be able to attain some level of success, excellence, fulfillment. The world doesn't deliver it to you and say, here, just pick it up. We have to choose our way into it, which means we have to believe, and we can talk about this because I think this is something that your audience, needs to hear today, is that we have to believe certain things about ourselves before we have proven our ability to do it. That's what confidence is, by the way.
How do we build? I'm going to jump to number 3, building self-confidence or belief, because that seems like the hardest thing to build, right? I think I can build self-awareness. I think I can build self-discipline.
Yep.
I'm sure there's help me think through building these skill sets versus just having them naturally.
Yep. And for context, the reason I wanted to start here is when we look back and we talk about development, the problem with development is people overconsume and under-reflect. So they're on a consumption treadmill. They're listening to every pod. They're reading all the books. They're reading all the blogs. And what happens is consuming is not the same thing as self-awareness. We're taking somebody else's thoughts. I would suggest this. Have a one-to-one. This is a really good reference point. Even if you don't meet this, at least your awareness goes up. Have a one-to-one ratio between consumption time to your individual self-led reflection time. If you read for 1 hour, then reflect for 1 hour on what you just read by yourself without anybody else's direction. Listen to this pod for 1 hour, then reflect on it for 1 hour. You won't stay at that one-to-one ratio at all times, but in my own life, I will read 1 page of a book and then I will write for 1 hour on it. Not because I have to do that, but because I'll read it and it'll hit me and I'll say, oh man. And so I'll have a 1 page read, 1 hour of writing. The reflection time is exponentially more valuable than the reading time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Second thing is the self-discipline is you have to do, right? If you're going to reflect, okay, the worst thing we can possibly do, okay, even if you're going to skip the reflection period, the thing you cannot skip is you have to do the things you consume. If you're not doing them, stop consuming them. Don't read a book that you're not going to implement. Don't do it. Go read the book that you've already read before and have implemented some of, and go implement that better. Stop reading or consuming stuff that you're not going to do. Pair up what you consume with the discipline to put it into action. So those 2 things being said, match one-to-one ratio of consumption to reflection. Don't consume things that you're not going to do. You're just better off not consuming it. Go back and do more reflection instead.
Matt King is the epitome of someone that has surrounded themselves with great people, and he's living proof that you become with whom you associate. He has grown up since his late teens around high-performing men, and wow, has he become one himself. The intentionality of how he lives his life is a great example that we can own and control our life if we just have the discipline and goals and things that we need to do that. So also, this is a great episode to listen to at the beginning of the year as you're doing your goals and setting your goals, things to think about. Matt has a lot of goals. That doesn't mean you need to start there, but he just has a lot of wisdom. So check out the clip and check out the full episode as well. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
My whole life is by design. And again, I was on this plane yesterday and I was showing somebody how I audit my network. So I literally have a process by which I write my 5 core values across the top, and I rate every single person that comes into my life, whether they're out of alignment, somewhat in alignment, or totally in alignment with my core values. I rate my wife, I rate my children, I rate my employees, my friends, my family, every single person I come into contact with, because I believe that really what life is all about is living intentionally, like living with a purpose. And it's not about oh, it has to be tied to the money, or oh, it has to be tied to this. That's not it for me. What ultimately life is about for me is living intentionally. It's like living a life by design, and not by design of someone else's choice, but by design of my choice. So I have goals. I've gone through a goal setting process for the last 10 years. I learned this process from David Osborne. I wouldn't say I've mastered it quite like he has, but I'm pretty freaking close. I set about 85 goals personally, about 80 goals professionally every single year.
Wow.
I have a habit tracker that if you read James Clear's Atomic Habits book, he'll share the tracker with you. I track my habits on a monthly basis. I have a 5-year vision that I'll review 25 times this year. I have a 50-year vision that I'll review 10 times this year. I have a vision board that hangs over my dresser that I look at every single day when I get my socks on. So like, for me, it's all intentional. Like there's very few things I do in my life that aren't intentional right now. And that's because I'm planning for what my life looks like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 50 years. Like I want to be able to have the life my way and by my design, not by, society's or Facebook's or somebody else's, right? And so I'm just constantly trying to program my mind and my being. This is where we're going.
I mean, 80 goals, I forget, 80 and 85 personal and professional,
Yeah.
really intentional. Is that, help me understand, like, does that feel overwhelming ever to try to accomplish all these things and be disciplined and intentional, or am I thinking about that the wrong way?
So I think it feels very overwhelming at first. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try to go from 0 goals to 160 goals. Yeah, that's overwhelming as heck. But what I did was I went from 0 goals to 5 goals to 10 goals to 50 goals to 100 goals to 160 goals. And then all of a sudden you see like, this isn't that overwhelming. This is just the power of habit, the power of momentum. It's no different, Phil, than if you haven't run at all and you said, okay, I'm going to run a marathon today. Like, yeah, that's overwhelming. You're going to fail. But if you're like, well, I would like to run a marathon. So today I'm going to run a mile. Tomorrow I'm going to run 2. Then I'm going to go back to a mile. Then I'm going to go to 3. Like that's how goal setting is. It's a muscle. It takes time to develop and evolve. And so for me, like it's not the only thing it is to me, Phil, is it's empowering because I understand that I achieve approximately 85% of what I write on this piece of paper every year. And so for me, it's not overwhelming. It doesn't create anxiety. It's not scary. For me, it's like I'm in the movie Harry Potter and I have this magic wand and I can have whatever I want in my life come true 85% of the time. I just have to put it on this piece of paper, track it, hold myself accountable to it. And then all of a sudden I wake up one day and it's there, right? So like for me, it's just super, super powerful and it's super sort of exhilarating because I look like a wizard. I have a magic spell. And all it is, honestly, is intentionality.
And all of a sudden your life starts to fall into place and it's by design and it's intentional. Help me though, for a listener. Okay, I'm not good at goal setting. So we're about halfway through the year when this comes out. Yeah. I didn't set goals for 2024 or I did and I'm just not following through. Like, give me the base. What should I do?
So the first thing you have to do is you have to reprogram the language you use. So like we're working with our kids right now to eat better. And so when our kids say, I don't like this, what we say immediately is you're learning to like it. You're still learning to like it. So the person that's listening going, I'm not a good goal setter or I don't set goals or I don't whatever, like eliminate that language all immediately. And the first thing you have to do is say like, I am not a goal setter yet. The number one word we should all be using in our language is yet. I'm not the father I want to be yet. I'm not the husband I want to be yet. I'm not the health freak that I want to be yet. And when you start to use that word yet, what you're telling your subconscious mind and what you're telling your being is there's still a chance we could become this. Like, let's go out and seek this, right? The mind and the body really want to solve problems. And so when you use the word yet, now you're telling your mind and your being like, well, we actually want this, so let's go figure it out. So the first thing I would do is I would change the language I use. The second thing I would do is I would take a journal, and it would be an empty journal, and I would go someplace that inspires me. I'd go by myself, and I'd probably turn off my phone. And I would sit, whether it's in nature, whether it's at a coffee shop, whether it's at my cabin, wherever it was for you and for the listener, I would go sit somewhere and I would just write down, the year is 2029. Wow, isn't life beautiful? And then I would just let whatever flows flow. We have 3 kids. The house is white. The dog is a lab. The car is pink. I can't believe I love playing golf. My husband loves yoga. My wife loves this. Like, I would just let my mind and my being flow on that piece of paper and just keep going. Like, don't get lost in reading it. Don't get lost in judgment. Don't get lost in how is this possible, but just let yourself flow. And then what I would do is I would go back and read it and say, how do I feel? Like, do I feel excited? Do I feel inspired? Do I feel scared? Do I feel like it's not big enough? And I would tweak it. I would tell you, like, you know, the beautiful part about writing or typing or using a pen or pencil is you can either cross it out, you can erase it, or you can backspace it. Like, nothing is set in stone forever.
Right.
So as you're reading it, if you don't like it, change it a little bit. And then once you have that sort of 5-year plan for your life, Now the question is what do you have to get done in the next 12 months that moves you one step closer to that? And I would start with one goal in each of the gardens of life. So I would start with one goal from a physical nutrition perspective. I'd start with one goal from a relationship perspective. I'd start with one goal from a spiritual and contribution perspective, one goal from a bucket list adventure perspective, and then one goal from like a personal financial perspective. And I wouldn't set an intention like, I want to be a better dad. Like, that's just an intention. That's impossible to track and that's impossible to measure. But I would say 52 date nights with my kids. Okay, that means one time a week on average, we're going on a date night with our children. Like, are you going to be a better dad or not at the end of the year? Like, the answer is yes, right? So I would set a goal in each of those gardens. I would tape it on my mirror, and every day I brush my teeth, I would read those out loud.
I love that. So the other thing I would say is that it's, if you didn't do this, you can do this at any time in the year. Like, you don't need to wait on January 1st to do this. The other thing that I think is really interesting, I was just talking to someone yesterday, and the listeners will hear this, but someone told me overconsumption and under reflection. We overconsume and under reflect, and we should really spend one-to-one time on, if we read or listen to a podcast or whatever, we should spend as much time journaling, writing, and reflecting for what it means for ourselves. And I think you're just reiterating, you didn't say that ratio, but you're reiterating the point. Like, whatever you've been thinking, write it down and then plan your life around it. And then you have a system to back into what it looks like now.
Yep.
I do want to ask, because I've had this thought. So you also said 50 years. And I've actually thought about this a little bit differently. I'm curious, but I've even thought 100 years. Yeah. Because the likelihood of where we'll be in 100 years is not on this earth. So what will I be remembered for? Or what will I be remembered for 100 years from now? And when you take that out, when you look at 100 years, it becomes a much, much bigger, quite frankly, more spiritual question than, any timeline within our lives. So, Matt O'Neill, the good mood dude. When I met Matt earlier this last year, I knew I had to get him on the podcast. The discussions we had at the event we were at were really encouraging and just motivational for me. And the discussion we had on the podcast, I think, were great. The discussions on upgrading your thinking to upgrade your life, the people you hang out with, the discussion on purpose and vision. So much good stuff in the episode. Some great content in this short clip that you'll hear. But Matt's just a great guy, and I'm excited to share this short clip. And of course, again, be sure to check out the entire episode, as he's got some powerful stuff in here that we can all apply to our lives.
Yeah, it all starts with vision. And when I was 25 and I was getting into real estate, someone gave me a book. It was called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I read that book, and it was a mind-opening experience. Up until that point, I kind of felt like life happened to me, and then I would make the best out of whatever happened to me. In that book, I realized the truth, which was everything in my life was there because of my thinking. And that if I wanted a different life, all I had to do was upgrade my thinking. And he talks in that book about the power of your peer group, proximity. He called it your mastermind. And the people that you spend your time with influence your thinking more than anything else. And at the time, I was spending time with a bunch of people who loved to drink and party because I loved to drink and party. And I was really good at it, like super good at drinking and partying. And but my ambitions were to be super good in business. And so I started to analyze the people I was hanging around and said, all right, some of these people I can't hang around as much. And so I limited my associations with people that didn't fit the vision of where I wanted to go. And that opened up space to find people that did fit the vision of where I wanted my life to go. And that was kind of the start of it. Because here's the thing, Phil, you know this, there's no secrets in the world. Like, the path of success has been already paved by countless others. All we have to do is find them and copy them.
Yep. So I want to talk about, you said limit associates, tough decisions. I wrote down tough decisions, limiting associations. How important is that? I mean, we've talked about that on the podcast a little bit before, but I don't know if we really dug into, like, was that difficult for you? Was it like tough discussions? How did you go about doing that? Because I think we all need to do that in different areas of our life, right? So I think it's important to spend a minute or two on it.
Super important. It's the most impactful influence in our lives is who we're spending time with. There was a study done when we used to harm animals to figure out things about human psychology. And they would they put these monkeys in a cage that had an electrified floor. And at any moment, the experimenter could push a button and electrocute these monkeys by their feet. And they all would just get shocked. And so what they did is they put a ladder in the middle of this room. And at the top of the ladder was a huge bunch of bananas. And they were starving the monkeys. Anytime a monkey got on the ladder, everyone else would get shocked. That was the experiment. Well, what would happen is they'd bring all the monkeys knew, do not get on that ladder. You're not getting those bananas. We're all going to get shocked. So if any monkey got on the ladder, they'd pull them off and then beat the crap out of them.
Oh my goodness.
Well, eventually they would pull out the old monkeys and bring in new ones. And every time the new one came in, he'd get on the ladder and they'd beat the crap out of him. Well, finally, the experimenters stopped shocking the monkeys when somebody touched the ladder. And eventually they pulled all the monkeys that had ever been shocked out of the room. But the monkeys still continued to pull somebody who touched the ladder off and beat the crap out of them. And they didn't even know why they were doing it. It was just because it had always been done that way. Well, we have the same tendencies within us. So if there are people that are in our circle that act in a certain way, we will mimic that behavior every single time because we have to. It's the way we have evolved. It's how we get along in the world. We have mirror neurons in our brains. And so if someone around you cusses all the time, you're far more likely to cuss. At the time, I was hanging out with people that cheated on their significant others. If I didn't get out of that crowd, I was probably in line to get a divorce one day. I was hanging in crowds where people were doing drugs. I was doing drugs. If I continued down that path, things would have been up way different than they are now. So I said, okay, I evaluated every single person in my immediate influence on a scale of 1 to 10 on 7 different areas. I gave them a score of 1 to 10 on health, on finances, on relationships, on their significant other, and on their contribution and charity. And I just I said, okay, well, this is where I averaged it all out. And I ended up being, the average ended up being like 5, 6, 7 in every category. And I'm like, okay, so right now I'm a 5, 6, 7 kind of guy.
Yep.
Because we are the average of the people we hang around.
Yep.
And so I said, all I got to do is find 9s and 10s in these categories.
Again, thank you. We are so appreciative of your support. We hope you enjoyed this highlight episode. If you haven't done so yet, we ask that you just take a minute or two to leave us a review, to share this episode with a friend, family member, coworker, or anyone that it could help. We're just so appreciative of you listening, and any way you can help is very, very appreciated. For the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off.